Hey everyone, this video is intended to be a short tactical demonstration video just because I've been reading intent threads again, and I really shouldn't for the sake of my own mental health. But something that came up in one of those conversations is that there is often a bit of a conversation around how does someone layer their AROs or get an effective ARO game in place if you can just always pie slice your opponent's AROs. And the example that's usually given is, let's say that we have these two Noctifer missile launchers here. Anyone with a reasonable eye and decent sort of hand-eye coordination, or who is working with a cooperative opponent that helps them play the game by intent, can slice these two Noctifer missile launchers. For example, a model on this corner here, let's say we picked up this post-human proxy Mark III, just copy her, place her down here. I can look at those Noctifers that are up there on that rooftop, and I can say, cool, if the post-human moves to here, maybe a little further out, it'll see this Noctifer first, and then it'll have to move a little further to see the second Noctifer. Those angles seem quite clear to me, with enough finagling and table eye height looking around, I could be reasonably sure that I would find the face-to-face roll that I wanted to, engage the first and then the second. So basically what that means is that if you are either playing a smooth game with intent, where you work with your opponent to describe and work out how actions will be taken, or if you spend lengthy amounts of time making those actions play perfectly yourself, this kind of ARO, where two models are next to one another, is not an effective layering of AROs. But that doesn't mean that you can't effectively layer AROs in the game. You just need to think about it in terms of the geometric possibilities that your models can occupy. So on this table, which is a table I played a game on a few days ago, I've set up a few situations that sort of show how you might be able to achieve dangerous or layered AROs, despite the fact that just putting two models next to one another often does not result in an ARO where you get two shots against your opponent's one model. So here's the first example of these, and it's just sort of bracketing a model in place. There's a prone Dakini here on this rooftop. I have put these two Noctifers here. I'm choosing Noctifers as the example model just because it's a bit of an archetypical single-shot ARO piece. They are not next to one another, but if this Dakini stands up, it will stand up in line of fire of both of them. I know where my opponent is likely to be activating, and I have put multiple eyes on my opponent, which presents a problem for my opponent to solve. Now, if my opponent got, say, some smoke down here, for example, if there were a Myrmidian in this building and they were able to get some smoke down, then the Dakini could stand, safely move, strafe, engage this Noctifer, then this Noctifer, but it would take them orders to do so, so I've sapped my opponent's resources by positioning to bracket his Dakini in place. The second example is over here in this building. Imagine in this case that these Noctifers are on this side of the board engaging enemies over here. This is vertical stacking. This is one of the few ways that you typically can guarantee multiple AROs against most avenues of approach. And that's because these Noctifers are one on top of one another. Anyone who's engaging from a set plane against those Noctifers is not going to be able to see one of them first and then the other. Any model that comes to this corner, as its line of fire moves around like this, it will see both Noctifers simultaneously. Any model that comes along this corner will see both Noctifers simultaneously. Any model approaching from any direction that would rely on horizontal pie slicing will not be able to pie slice against these Noctifers. You could pie slice against them by using vertical pie slicing though. So for example, a model on ground level here, say a Silhouette 6 model, could use this railing to block line of fire, but then see the topmost Noctifer and not the bottommost Noctifer. So it is always possible to find an ARO slice, to find a pie slice, if you will, but by stacking your models vertically, you put the onus on your opponent not to pie slice horizontally, but to pie slice vertically, which is more challenging. And then finally, you should often be able to stack your AROs if you just think about a single avenue of approach. So we've got two that we've set up here. So in this case, we played this building as see into or out of, but not through. So there is one sort of like quite clear approach into the building that I'm concerned about. It's this window and this door. So I've got two Noctifers set up where each Noctifer can see all of this window and all of this door. That means it does not matter how my opponent approaches along this avenue, provided they enter via this window or enter via this door, both Noctifers will have an ARO. That won't help me if my opponent comes all the way around here, up to this doorway, and then slices out here. They'll get a shot first on this Noctifer and then on this Noctifer. But I've set up in a position to bracket this doorway so that I know I've got a linked ARO, which limits my opponent's options. Similarly, and this is probably the trickiest that will require the most finagling and often talking to your opponent about what your intent is. Let's say I was concerned about this approach, and in particular a model coming up here to see this direction. I've placed one Noctifer prone, one Noctifer standing, so that each will see a model as a model comes around this corner. So to get our post-human again, if a post-human was coming along this direction, basically as soon as they poke their head out sufficient to get line of fire, both models can see. Now, nominally, if this building were not here, the post-human's line of fire would, like, she'd see models here, and then here, and then here, and then she would see this Noctifer first, and then this Noctifer. But because this Noctifer is hanging as far back as possible, and this model Noctifer's base is predominantly obscured by the building, then most likely she'll see both Noctifers at the same time. This is the example of the two that is sort of like you need to communicate with your opponent what it is that you're doing, because it does rely on an agreement that there isn't some infestimably small line where as the post-human's line of fire moves to here, and then to here, and then finally to here, that she can't see one of them first and then the other. And you may need to ask your opponent, hey, what would be the way that I would set this up? And if push came to shove, perhaps you would need to move this Noctifer back to here and accept a position out of cover to be sure that any line that crosses this Noctifer's base also crosses this Noctifer's base. So maybe this positioning would be better. But in short, those are a few different ways that you can potentially, just with normal ballistic skill attack AROs, no layering repeaters with BS attacks or layering deployables with repeaters or any of the other different ways that you can build a powerful ARO game, just a couple of ways that you can position your models even when you are playing with intent and talking to your opponent about the angles that might be taken and confirming them before movement is locked in, how you can bracket positions and ensure that multiple AROs are taken, mostly to disincentivize your opponent from taking those routes.